you both?
Good to see you, Dr. Charlie. Thank you so much.
Well, yeah, it's a pleasure. You know, I was just saying just now, it's lovely after 2 years of fighting, and telling people what was going to happen to see the collapse of the cabal, the collapse of what's bad. And it's starting in Canada, where the truckers have got together on their tens of thousands and headed to Ottawa and put it into lockdown. And literally within an hour of them locking Ottawa down, the government capitulated on their mandates. And they realized if they didn't capitulate on their mandates, they'd probably land up dead. And what we said earlier is that a bully will bully behind the television cameras. But when you come face to face with a real human being, they've got absolutely no bollocks at all, or no balls, as you want to call them. I mean, they're spineless little nerds. Behind a camera, they can shout and scream all day long and threaten people, and we've seen it all. But when it comes to the backbone, they just don't have it. And we're seeing it collapse in Canada, and it will happen again in America, where they're going to head off as well. A convoy's heading across America too. And that's going to be fun. And there's one in Europe that's going to Brussels as well. So they've got it coming to them, and they've seen it. They've seen the first one in Canada, and they've seen what happens there. So
it's huge, massive.
Yeah.
You know, there's a line of truckers in the U.S. that are at the border that couldn't get in, that they're waiting and supporting and all that. They're waiting to join the convoy to Washington, D.C.
What's amazing is the fact that the mainstream media are failing to cover it. They're trying to cover it all up as if nothing ever happened. A handful of truckers. Let's just talk about a handful of truckers. You must have some very, very big hands, I said, because there's figures ranging between 50,000 trucks and 100,000 trucks. And the longest line recorded is 150 miles long.
Wow.
That's the longest in history. And Guinness would love to have that in their record books, but the mainstream media don't want to cover that because there's only a handful there. But they're lying in plain sight now, and people will see that.
Right. Well, I've seen even the Amish community is
Yes.
feeding them, and then they have their own tankers for fuel because they told them don't let them eat and don't let them fuel up. So the truckers have got their support to do it anyway.
That's exactly right. It's another group very similar to the Amish in Canada. The Amish, I believe, are based in America, but the Canadian version of people are doing exactly that. They provided fuel and food. And very interesting, we had a video today of a young child that was giving a bag of sweets to one of the drivers who got attacked by a police officer for doing so.
Oh, my.
When the world starts to see that, anybody who attacks a child will have to suffer the consequences. And this whole journey is about the protection of our children.
Yeah.
So if anybody is publicly attacking children publicly at the moment, then they will have what's coming to them fair and square.
Right, I agree.
Charlie, do you think that I've wondered about this? Like, let's say there's a news anchor, like on CNN, for example, and they're saying stuff that is inaccurate. Do you think that they know what they're saying is inaccurate, but they just want a paycheck? Or do you think they're just hypnotized to actually believe what they're saying?
Well, Dr. P, I grew up in the Plymouth Brethren, and it was a religious cult, and I was brainwashed. I was indoctrinated, whatever you want to call it. And I believe that most of the anchors, most of them, and the other people involved there, are brainwashed by their bosses. But as you know, in a court of law, ignorance is no defense. And they will face what's coming to them, because as much as people say, this is wrong, or this is right, the responsibility as sovereign beings, as living souls, it's every single person's responsibility to establish their own truth and making sure their truth is accurate. I've said many times, you need to reset your moral compass. And if you believe in God, ask God. If you believe in Allah, ask Allah. If you don't believe in any of that, ask your mother or your grandmother, but make sure you make an accurate decision. Pardon me. And it's very important, because there's a lot of people out there who are saying to me, Charlie, I just want this all over. Well, I can assure you it will not be over until you stand up to the truth and stand up against what's wrong. And that'll speed the process up. This would have all been over by now if people had stood up against evil. It'd been over a long time ago. But people need to wake up. It's everybody's duty. And if you don't have the time, then I understand that. There's a lot of single parents out there, single mothers, working all the hours that God sends, looking after their families. They don't have the time to do the research. What they do have is common sense. And I've spoken to a few of them that have common sense. And you just need to stand up against tyranny. It's amazing how quickly they evaporate when you stand up against them.
Charlie, do you think that, like there's this concept, it's a biblical concept, I believe, and it's a concept you find in a lot of other places, that good will ultimately triumph over evil. It's a concept you hear a lot. How do you think that works? Why do you think that happens?
It goes back to the beginning, doesn't it? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So what God has created, let no man tear asunder. I think that's the foundations of where we've come from.
It's interesting. I was reading a book recently by a retired New York City police officer. He was a New York City police officer for 20 years, I believe in the 1970s and 80s. And if anyone knows the history of New York City was out of control in the 70s and 80s. And I actually lived there. I was there. I saw it with my own eyes. But anyway, so regardless of what people think of police officers now, in the 70s and the 80s, this particular police officer appeared to, be trying to do a good job. And he wrote something interesting in his book. And he said he had noticed this in his 20 years as a New York City cop. And he said he thought about it for years and years and years. He said he never understood it, but I'll tell you what the phenomena was. It relates to what we were just saying. He said that if you looked at all his fellow cops in New York City in those 20 years, some were in shape, some were out of shape, some were strong, some were weak, some really trained well to be a cop, some didn't train as well. Some were very good shots with a gun, some were not as good. But he said in 999 out of 1,000 confrontations between cops and the criminals in a fight, like sometimes their weapons were not available, they're fighting. He said 999 out of 1,000, the cops would win. He said he never understood it because he said a lot of these criminals were in good shape. They knew how to box. They, whatever was going on with them, they were insane, which maybe contributed to them being a good fighter, maybe. But anyway, and he said he never quite understood how invariably the cops would always win these fights. And then he said, I was reading his book, he said, at least he thinks it was that kind of good and evil thing. Again, not that all criminals are evil. Maybe they had a terrible, upbringing. They didn't know how else to function in the world, so they had to rob and steal. I don't think he was judging anyone in particular. And obviously there's plenty of crooked cops, but he was just saying in general, just this notion of when the cop went into the confrontation, like, I'm doing good, somehow affected that. And he said it was drastic and very interesting. So anyway, I just was thinking about that with the whole so-called good and evil situation.
It's very much, you've hit the nail on the head, because it's very much in the psyche. Because I remember I was bullied at school and I got a damn good beating a few times. The first time I ever stood up against somebody, they were a lot bigger than me. And they threatened me. And I just, for some stupid reason, I put my nose against their nose. I said, make sure your first shot's the best shot you've got, because it's the last shot you'll ever have. And they backed down. And I promise you, my knees were banging together like crazy. And I desperately needed the toilet. I was petrified inside. And yet when he stood down and walked back, I mean, the feeling inside was incredible. And we've talked a lot about the power of the mind, frequencies, the zonal healing. Even it comes down to balance.
Well, it's interesting, Charlie. I had an interesting experience, and some of the people in Zone School know this, but I'm going to relate it. I think Greg knows it, just because it's interesting when you said about the frequencies and the vibration. So anyway, long story short, I'll kind of give you the abridged version. There's a professional fighter. He lives in Hawaii. He hurt himself badly. He's young. He's in his 20s. He hurt himself badly a few months ago. There's a few chiropractors in his part of Hawaii he went. There's actually a very famous acupuncturist near him that he went to. And I think he went to a physical therapist. But anyway, he did not heal. He got referred to me. He flew from Hawaii to see me. We fixed him up. He healed. He went back to Hawaii. I hadn't seen him in a month or so. He had a fight coming up. Actually, the fight was a few days ago. But anyway, this was about 2 weeks ago. He was training for this fight, and he hurt himself again. Not as badly as originally when he came to see me, but nonetheless, he hurt himself. He called me up and said, look, I have this fight in 2 weeks. What should I do? I said, well, listen, you're basically better. You just had a minor injury training. Just go to one of these chiropractors or go to that acupuncturist or whatever. So about 2 days later, he called me. He did go to, I think, one of those chiropractors and the acupuncturist. He didn't get better. He said, look, I'm going to fly to see you. The guy flew 5,000 miles. I mean, he flew where he was in Hawaii to where where he came to see me. He flew 5,000 miles. And I'm getting to the thing about vibration. But anyway, so he came. I worked on him twice. A zone session can be short. I think I worked on him for 2 minutes. So I worked on him 2 days in a row for 2 minutes. So essentially 4 minutes. So when I saw him on the third day, because I told him to stay for a few days, just in case, I wasn't sure how long it would take. So after the 2 sessions, when I saw him on the third day, I said, how are you? He said, I'm all better. So essentially he flew 5,000 miles one way for 4 minutes. And the reason I mentioned this, and I thought about it, I thought about this because I mean, how bad could the chiropractors be in his part of Hawaii? I mean, it's not that complex. Okay? Mm-hmm. But it's when you have some kind of knowledge and some kind of confidence and some kind of expectation of healing, that vibration, I'm going to get to the vibration in a second, that vibration is very powerful because believe me, Charlie, if you were in the room and you saw my physical interaction with him, it was very basic. I mean, if the zone technique is a very easy technique to do. It's very basic and he got all better. And it reminded me, just because I had this expectation, yeah, I'm going to work on you'll get better. That expectation leads to a certain vibration. And again, I'm not a biblical expert, but if I'm not mistaken, someone can correct me if I'm wrong. Jesus said, pray and then expect that it will happen. Mm-hmm. That's it. Yep. He didn't just say pray. Yeah. I believe he said pray and then expect that it will come or whatever. It will happen. It will manifest. And that expectation apparently was part of it. So that kind of I expected him to get better. And that vibration, as you mentioned, played a big part. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that in there based on what you said. And, after he left, and by the way, he won. He had his fight. He won a few days ago. So anyway.
That goes back very much to the first time that I came into contact with a pastor who laid hands on somebody and healed them. It freaked me out, completely freaked me out. And I left that particular church because I couldn't handle it. And then when I thought about it and thought, well, if a washing machine is made by Whirlpool and it breaks down, you take it back to Whirlpool. So on the basis that God made man, if you've got somebody who has a connection to God, and you talked about prayer, somebody has a connection to God and you take it back to God and say, God, you've made this. In very simple language, you've made it. Could you repair it for me, please? And if you have faith in God, which is what you're saying, you expect it because God made every one of us, in my belief. And then if there's something that he's doing and you ask him and you have faith, and it says it's biblical, have faith and be healed.
Well, Hebrews 11:1 says faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. So it's like you have title deed to that thing that's not seen yet.
Sure.
So that's faith. And it's interesting because I had a great story yesterday in my office. Let me preface it by saying in zone school, we learn about the 6 zones that are in the brain that control every cell, every function, everything that goes on in our existence is controlled by these 6 zones. And that's the glandular, the eliminative, the nervous, the digestive, the muscular, and circulatory. And so one of the things we've learned in zone school is each of those zones have some emotional part to it. And so I'm just going to go through those really quick, and then I'll tell you the story of what happened. And so zone 1 is the lack of creative outlets. And zone 2 is changes in life, like major changes. Zone 3 is worry. And zone 4 is disgusted. And zone 5 is overloaded, like the weight of the world on your shoulders. And zone 6 is someone or something not allowing you to be or to do what you want to do. And so this family, very close family, came in. There's 4 of them came in yesterday, and the mother is a husband and wife and a son in his 20s, and then a really close friend. They were all there together getting adjusted, and her mom was close to. She was preparing to die, and they were so close in the family. Well, her mom passed away Friday, and so they all came in to get adjusted yesterday. And guess which zone was off on all 4 of them? It was zone 2, which is eliminative, and that's changes in life, like major changes in life. So they all had this big emotional change in life Friday, and zone 2 showed up on yesterday, which was the major change that happened in their family. And every one of them walked out of there with much more confidence that they can handle the stresses of what was going on. They were just elated as to how much better they felt because I cleared zone 2.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I just want to add to that. One thing Dr. Gregg said, he talked about the common, not always, but common emotional connections between the different zones or systems of the body. He went over them: zone 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, glandular, eliminative, nerve, digestive, muscular, and circulatory, which are the 6 systems or zones of the body. And he went over some of the emotions that can affect it. And he gave the example of a major change can sometimes show up in or affect or unbalance sometimes the eliminative system. And actually, what's interesting, Charlie, is when someone is ill, when someone has a digestive problem, or they have a glandular problem, or they have a gynecological problem, or they have a muscle problem, maybe their low back hurts, whatever. It's pretty common in the world we live in. We live in a very physically oriented world, at least the way we think of it. So if someone has a digestive problem, someone might say, oh, maybe you're eating the wrong food, which, could be, but that could be an assumption by some doctor they go to. Or if someone has a muscle problem, the doctor might say, oh, well, maybe you're lifting incorrectly. Maybe they are, I don't know. And you can see, with more and more examples, these physical manifestations in the body, very often people will look for a physical cause of it. Like I said, maybe the digestion is off because of eating. Maybe the muscles are off because of lifting wrong or whatever. And it could be, maybe it is those things. But I can tell you, some of the real masters, I don't mean just masters because they're saying they're masters or they're eloquent or they write a nice book. I mean masters because their healing results were astounding. Some of the real masters that I've read say that 99% of what affects the physical is from, for lack of a better word, we'll call it the emotional. So it's interesting when someone has terrible digestion, they have heartburn or acid reflux or stomach aches or irritable bowel syndrome or whatever. I would venture to say, after doing what I'm doing since the early 1990s, mid 1990s, I would venture to say that it is a fact that 99% of what manifests in the physical body is from the emotions. And if someone has horrible digestion, they probably are disgusted with something or very angry or whatever. Now, just on a simple level, I'll just give you the most simplistic example, because there's many examples which are a little deeper, but just a simplistic example. If someone is in a normal, relaxed state, and their blood is in, various parts of their body. It could be in their skeletal muscle, so they can move around. It could be in their digestive system, so their digestive organs have the proper blood flow and they can function properly. But let's just say someone's driving their car, someone cuts them off, they get incredibly angry. I'm not saying everyone gets angry when they get cut off, but let's just say, in my example, this person gets incredibly angry. What happens is they go into, as you know, what's known as fight or flight. So what happens in fight or flight is all the blood, not all the blood, but a lot of the blood goes to the musculature to prepare them for fight or flight. But they do neither because they're in their car. They're not running anywhere. They're not fighting anybody. They're just in their car. Nonetheless, the blood is all in the skeletal muscle because that's the reaction they had. And guess where it's not? In the digestive organs, because it's in the skeletal muscle. So now the digestive organs are suffering, at least for the moment, probably a few moments, because of lack of proper blood in that area. And guess what? They start malfunctioning. So that person with the habitual anger and the habitual fight or flight, it's no surprise that they have horrible digestion. Now, here's the thing. They go to whoever they go to, some medical, a gastroenterologist. They tell them they have heartburn and or acid reflux and or whatever, stomach aches or whatever their problem is. And the gastroenterologist, for the most part, will just say, well, here's, just take this, it will, whatever it will do. The thing they're giving them does nothing to address the physical imbalance. It just masks the symptom. B, it most likely has side effects on the liver or whatever else has to filter it out. And C, the actual cause, which is the habitual anger, which is not dealt with at all, is not even acknowledged, addressed, understood, nothing. And then this person's just taking this garbage, for X amount of years, probably still has digestive problems, probably doesn't even work. And all those things happen. And it's just a little side note, it's interesting because chiropractors, not in zone school, but chiropractors in general, if they're in zone school, they understand the big picture, but chiropractors in general are very proud of the fact that they don't address symptoms. They adjust the cause. So they would say, well, this person has digestive problems, but I'm not going to give them something in their mouth to take. I'm actually going to adjust them chiropractically so to balance their body, supposedly, to address the cause. But the real cause is the anger in this case, which is not really being addressed. So just wanted to give that little side note for chiropractors. But anyway, it's very interesting to understand the bigger picture of why people actually get, for lack of a better word, sick in the first place. And Gregg gave some good examples of that.
Yeah, and a lot of people will be sick right now because of the stress that they've been put under by mainstream media and governments lying to them about whatever's going on out there. For those people who've done research, we know an awful lot more. But for those people who've not had the time to do the research, they've been living in fear, living in isolation. And these things have a huge impact on your health.
When you said, Charlie, when you said fear, when you said living in fear and health, I just want to add to that equation, because I mentioned anger just as a random thing. It doesn't matter. It could be jealousy, it could be greed, it could be hate, it could be whatever. But you mentioned fear, and I just want to say that Dr. Fleet, who I've mentioned before, who had a big effect on, Dr. Fleet said, and I'm sure he's not the only one who ever said, but Dr. Fleet said that every other negative emotion is based on fear. So in other words, anger is from fear. Worry, obviously, is from fear. Hate is from fear. Greed is from fear. Jealousy is from fear. Selfishness is from fear. Vanity is from fear. So you're quite correct. Fear, because that's what you mentioned in that context. Fear, of course, it can stand on its own to create some problems or whatever. But all these other negative emotions are based on fear, and all those other negative emotions cause potentially dis-ease in the body.
We use
that's my definition. Oh, sorry, Charlie.
Now go on.
My definition of fear is false evidence appearing real.
Yep, exactly right. We use the term scared to death without really realizing that fear can kill you. We use the term very lightly. Oh, I was scared to death. And of course, people can die literally of shock. And I've actually witnessed somebody in a car accident who literally died before that, apparently before the impact happened, because they could see it happening, and they literally, because when we got to the scene of the accident, they were completely unmarked. It wasn't like they had taken a bash to the head or anything. They would still have the seatbelt on. And the doctor and the it's not a judge, I forget what the his name's gone right out of my head. They certified the coroner certified the person as dead, and they died suddenly out of shock.
Charlie, you know, I think I mentioned this on one of our other conversations, but in case I didn't, I'm going to mention it now. And even if I did, it's good. In reference to what you just said, I read, actually, what I'm going to tell you now, I read this, and I've mentioned this in Zone School several times. I read this in a British medical journal. I forgot what it's called there. It starts with an L. But anyway, is it called Lancet?
The Lancet.
That's it. I read it in one of their issues. So what I read was that in, I think it was the year 1900 or 1901 or 1902, but it was right around then, there was a prisoner in England on death row. So I guess he killed someone. I don't know why. I don't know why he was on death row, but he was. And obviously, at that point, there was much less prisoner rights. So they were just going to kill him. There was not much to talk about. Now, at the time, Charlie, some of the medical doctors in England kind of understood. They didn't really understand, but they understood a little bit some of these principles of like the subconscious and the mind's effect on the body. So they wanted to experiment with that stuff. So they figured, well, we'll just experiment on this guy because we're going to kill him anyway. So they did experiment on this guy during the execution. So this actually happened. It's pretty amazing. Listen to this. And it goes exactly with what you're saying. So this guy, they were going to experiment on him. So they had several, or at least a few medical doctors present or whatever. So they told him they were going to blindfold him and cut a small cut in the back of his neck.
That's right.
And let him bleed to death.
That's right.
So what they did was they did blindfold him. They did cut him, but they sealed it right away. So he either didn't lose any blood or he may have lost a drop of blood. But nonetheless, he was blindfolded. They dripped water over the cut. So he had the sensation of bleeding to death down his back. So there's two things about this story which are pretty interesting. The first thing is that he died in 6 minutes. So he was dead in 6 minutes. And the second thing is, because they had the medical doctors observing, his body in those 6 minutes displayed exactly all the symptoms physically of someone bleeding to death. So there you go.
Yeah. It just shows that the power of the mind. And as easy as it is to go one way, if you have a strong mentality the other way. I listened to somebody the other day that I thought was amazing. The moment you can stop worrying about what other people think about you, you will learn that the parameters of where you can actually go far supersede what you ever dreamt. The minute you stop worrying what other people think, you can reach levels that you would think were impossible. And that goes exactly the opposite way to what you've just said there. And it proves that both sides, you can be on the negative side and land up dead, or you can be on the positive side and do not worry what other people think, because it doesn't matter what other people think. For some reason in life, we worry what other people think. As I've got older, I've worried less about what other people think.
Well, one thing that could help anyone. I mean, I think we all have that to a degree, and like you said, it's faded for you as time has gone on. But I think people should realize that most people are thinking about themselves and not thinking about you anyway.
Sure, exactly right. Exactly right.
That's a good start. And it's interesting about what we said about the example you gave about the person with the car and the example I gave of the prisoner. I remember when I think I was about 21, I read a book. It's a great book. It's called Zen, Z-E-N, in the martial arts. The guy's name was Joe. I think his last name was Hyams. Great book. Highly recommend it for anyone. Zen in the martial arts. Really, really amazing read. I've reread it like 5 or 6 times. Anyway, now I have to admit, when I was 21, I thought it was the greatest book ever. I mean, now I think it's a good book, but at the time I was very impressed. But anyway, he gave this example. He was driving in Europe somewhere with his wife at the time. I don't know what was happening to him, but his body went into some kind of shock or something like that, and it appeared that he was going to die. I mean, something happened to him. I forgot exactly what it was, but he was having some kind of breakdown. And his wife was driving, and she was frantically trying to get to the next town to get to some hospital. And he said, if I remember the chapter correctly, he said that he thought he was dying on the spot. Something was happening with his body. He wasn't sure what. And he just said to himself, what can I do? I'm just sitting. I guess he was laying in the back seat. His wife was frantically driving, and he felt like that was it for him. Mm-hmm. And he said, what can I do? But he just started doing some deep breathing, nothing fancy. It's not like he's an expert at yogic breathing or anything. He just tried to calm himself. Mm-hmm. Just did some, I guess some deep breaths in through the nose, out through the mouth. And by the time they got to the town, to the doctor, he was fine. But again, that breathing had an effect on his mind, and he probably was falling apart for some reason. And just using his mind in a positive way, and he threw the breathing in, saved him. And he wrote a whole chapter about it, and it did save him.
I don't think many people in the world have any idea how the strength of the mind, the strength of the body. It's a bit like, for me, a computer. I know how to use Microsoft Office, Word, Excel. I reckon I know 1% about what my computer can do. And that's very much like the human body. I think and I remember speaking to a brain surgeon in his 80s who said to me, Charlie, we're in the 21st century. And I can assure you, I'm one of the best brain surgeons in the world. And we still know no more than 5% about the human brain in the 21st century. Well, and that's very much the case now that we're going through. The beauty of what we're doing now, forget the political bullshit, forget all that. We've got lots and lots of doctors out there sharing knowledge. That is constructive.
Charlie.
Charlie.
Sorry, Greg. Go ahead.
It's interesting some of the things we learn in zone school is that, I take a history and like because I'm supposed to, but in talking about emotions and stuff, well, I really don't have to take a history because I can lay them down, and what we learn in zone school to find out which zone is out of balance, which brain center is out of balance. And I'll go through there and I'll say, you have some digestive issues, don't you? And they'll say, how in the heck do you know that? And I say, well, your brain just told on you. So you can't really hide what's going on, or you can tell if they have muscular issues, or if they have hot flashes or hormone issues or whatever. We can detect that by determining which zone is out of balance. There may be more than one, which almost everybody, all their zones are out of balance, but we can find the primary one. And then we'll show them the chart as to all the things that zone is responsible for. And they'll go, oh my God, yeah, that's me. That's me. There I am. Yep. And so it just fits them perfectly. So they are so on board with getting the zone treatment because of what I found by them, not even me knowing what was going on.
And Greg, I just want to add to that. First of all, let me just say, anyone who's inspired by some of the stuff that's being discussed on a healing level, and I've said this before on other visits here, but I want to just say, anyone who wants to learn more about this can just simply go to zonetechnique.com. So I just wanted to say that, zonetechnique.com, for 2 reasons. One is, you may be a chiropractor, you may be an acupuncturist, you may be a naturopath, you may be a medical doctor, an osteopath, a Reiki master. If you're any kind of doctor, if you're any kind of doctor or healer, you can go to zonetechnique.com and you can join Zone School right on the homepage. Now, if you're a layperson who's just looking for healing, and you want to see if there's a certified zone practitioner anywhere near you, you can also go to zonetechnique.com. And you can go to the directory and you can put in your area and see if someone's near you. So just wanted to say that. Anyway, I just wanted to add that. But Greg, great point. And anyone who's inspired, feel free to go to the website.
I think it was very important what Gregg said there about your body telling stories on you. Your body actually communicates. And for those people, just to put it in very simple layman's terms, your body communicates on your behalf without you saying anything. And an example of that is when you walk into a place and a woman gives you the eye and you get a little fluster inside. That's your body communicating. And it does the same, as Gregg was saying, when, you know, whether it's your digestive system, your body will communicate.
Greg is so used to that he doesn't even get flustered anymore.
Yeah, I tell you what, if I sent some of the women that I've seen around in America with their big mamas with a cleavage, I'm sure his heart would start going like this.
Greg has nerves of steel. He's not affected at all.
Yeah, but his emotions are there. His emotions are there.
Charlie.
Exactly.
I just wanted to say about when you know, Charlie, you said about the 80-year-old or the brain surgeon in his 80s, and said we only understand about 5% of the body. I want to add one thing one of the many things I really love about the zone technique. Check this out. So when we feel the back of the head, the points in the back of the head relate to the 6 brain centers and the 6 systems. But it's interesting because sometimes the patient will come to me and the symptom that they have, it's very connected to the system that shows up. So for example, we'll just use that easy example of digestion because we've been using it before. If someone comes into me and tells me they have digestive problems, and I happen to feel the back of their head, and sure enough, their digestive system is off, it's very easy for me to tell them, well, oh, of course you have digestive problems. Your digestive system is imbalanced. We're going to balance your digestive system. And then I expect your digestion to be perfect. But check this out, in light of what you said about the brain surgeon. Very often people will come and they'll tell me why they're here to see me. They'll tell me their symptom. But when I feel their head, the system that shows up, it really has nothing to do with why they're coming. But it doesn't matter because, like you said, we only understand 5% of the body. And the bottom line is the body is telling us in that moment what's not balanced. And if we balance the body based on what it's telling us, I can still expect, with that same level of expectation, that patient to heal. And I'll give you a specific example. When I first went into practice, this is the mid-1990s, I remember, for whatever reason, I don't know what reason, but I'm just relating it, for whatever reason, I had a slew. I mean, like a slew, it was like 20 patients. It was in about a 4-month period, but about 20 patients came to me with irregular heartbeats, atrial fibrillation, whatever. Their heart was not beating normally. They were not life-threatening conditions, but nonetheless, their heart was beating abnormally. Now, I don't know what the current medical technology is for that, but at that time, in the 1990s, the cardiologist they had went to said, look, you have this irregular heartbeat. It's not going to kill you, but there's no real cure for it. As a matter of fact, if I remember correctly, at that point, there was one procedure where they do something, they put like some kind of, I guess they enter the body surgically through the thigh or the inner thigh. They go up to presumably the heart and do
catheterization.
Yeah, I don't remember what it was, but I remember even the cardiologist said at the time in the 1990s, it's only about 30% effective. So a lot of people chose not to do it because it had such a low success rate. They didn't want to go through all that. Not to mention their irregular heartbeat was not life-threatening. It was just, you might say, annoying. But anyway, here's the cool part. So they were coming into me one after another, and I was balancing them out, and their hearts were beating normally, and they would go to their cardiologists, who were quite bewildered that they went to some chiropractor, and now their heart was beating normally. But here's the cool part. I talked about sometimes the system that shows up and the symptom, they don't seem to add up intellectually. Charlie, I can tell you that if there were 20 of those people who came with irregular heartbeats, I think 19 of them showed up as zone 2, which is the elimination system. Now, how the elimination system is the sinuses, lungs, kidneys, intestines, bladder. Now, how the elimination system and the heart are connected. I mean, they must be connected on some level, but I don't know the exact, such a direct connection that by helping the elimination system heal, the heart will beat normally. I don't quite understand that, but it doesn't matter because that's what the body was telling me through the zones. I did those points. We reset their eliminative system over a few weeks or month and a half or whatever it took, and their heart beat normally. So that's another great thing about the zones.
I have a great example of that where it doesn't make any sense. That one of my best friends came in and he's like, "Oh God, Greg, oh God, help. I can't walk, my back, help me. Oh God, I'm in trouble." And he barely could walk in there. So I said, "Here, lay down here." And I checked him and zone 4 was off. His digestive system was off. And I thought, wow, that doesn't make any sense. He's coming in with severe hot low back. And that doesn't make any sense that it's digestive. But I've learned to trust the zones, and I learned to trust what the zone is telling me. I said, your brain's priority is the digestive system. So I've learned to trust it. So I'm going to clear zone 4 and let's see what happens. I cleared zone 4. He got off the table in zero pain, hopping around in my office going, "What the hell did you just do to me?" I said, "Look, I just did what your brain was asking for. And then I stepped back and let the miracle of life take place." And he was blown away. And that was like a year ago. And he's not been back since.
If we look for the same answers and they're not working, this is what we're going through right now in real life. Is when we actually submit and just say, fine, show me the right way. When we listen to our body, as you said, listen to the points. You may think, oh, no, it's definitely not that. It's definitely not that. It's this. Then suddenly your body will tell you what it is. And this is the common sense right now with what's happening in the world right now is the opportunity just to sit back, turn off the television, turn off the news, and use common sense and listen to our bodies, listen to what's within. And that's where you'll find the truth of what's happening right now. That's exactly the same as what you're doing with zonal healing, rather than them coming and telling you. If you could almost say to them, if you know what's wrong, why are you coming to me? But they come to you and say, look, Dr. Gregg, Dr. Pete, my back hurts. You're better off shutting up at that stage and say, tell me what's wrong with me, rather than trying to pretend you know what's wrong with you.
Well, actually, on that note, Charlie, I don't quite say this because I don't want to get into it with them, but sometimes, it doesn't happen all the time, but once in a while, a patient will come and they're like, I have this medical doctor. I love them. They are I've been going to this they tell me they've been going to this medical doctor for 20 years. He's the top, in the hospital. They're so enamored with their medical doctor. Meanwhile, they have freaking panic attacks and heartburn and period cramps and insomnia and back pain. And they're telling me that they've been under the care of this doctor for 20 years and he's the greatest or she's the greatest. I don't even say anything. I just fix up whatever's going on with them. But it's interesting how people get hypnotized to that. They, hypnotized to having a so-called great physician. Meanwhile, they're one of the sickest people walking around. So I don't know how that whole equation.
But that's irony, isn't it? If they're such a good doctor, you would never go back to them.
Actually, it's interesting. I heard Charlie, as far as I know, I don't know if I have exactly the details right, but I think I do. I think in China, I don't think it's like that anymore, but at some point in China, maybe 1,000 years ago or something, when you went to the traditional Chinese medicine doctors or the acupuncturist, you only paid them when you were healthy.
I've heard that.
Yeah.
So if you got ill, they worked on you, but it was for free. But once you were healthy and you maintained your health, you just kept paying them because they were essentially contributing to that in some way.
Yeah.
Maybe we should adopt that in the US.
Cool, dear. Yeah. Incredible, isn't it? It's the reverse of communism.
Right. By the way, when Gregg mentioned his friend who had the low back issue, but their digestive system showed up and he balanced their digestion and their back got better and he jumped off the table.
Yeah.
And it just one more example of this, that the body actually, the zone, thankfully the zone technique will let the body tell you what it wants at that moment. I've had people come in, listen, maybe Gregg, I don't know what the connection is. I've had not several, but I've had, 10 people come with really bad knee problems. Their knee really hurts and I feel their head and it's the glandular system.
Mhm.
And even when I chat with them about their glands, it appears symptomatically their glands are fine, but that's what their body says. So we balance their glandular system and their knee gets better. Now, I'm not exactly sure of the connection between the glands and the knee, but I've seen that enough times just to take note of that. So it's pretty cool just to add that to the list there.
Brilliant. Well, guys, it's always a pleasure to see you guys and great to catch up with you. And it's very, very positive. And this is what the world needs right now, is positivity and the fact that we don't need drugs. We don't need medicine. We don't need illegal drugs or legal drugs, either of them. But what we do need is a positive mental attitude and being able to sort ourselves out and not live in fear. And if we have these things, you'll be amazed how many of these can be healed by zonal healing. And as you rightly say, we'll share the links down below so that people can make contact with you and find out if there's somebody near them, or if you're already a chiropractor or a physiotherapist or in the field that you'd like to get into this zonal treatment, then these are the two of the best guys you'll ever meet. So the links are down below. And thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Charlie. We appreciate you.